Okay, so it is the first week of student leadership. First off, I just want to say I'm so excited about every single one of you guys and the commitment that you've made. This is a huge, huge deal, and I'm so pumped about this year. We've got a lot of new things, and so we're going to jump right off into the first teaching. And so what we're going to do, we're going to actually, there's this group called the Bible Project, and what they're doing is they're breaking down every book of the Bible, and they're explaining why it's important to the whole Bible in and of itself. If you don't know about the Bible, I mean, we all know about the Bible. We all know the Bible is important, but I don't think a lot of times we know exactly what the Bible is. We don't know how we got the Bible, how the Bible became the Bible. We don't know, for example, in the New Testament, most of the New Testament is actually letters written to churches that were planted, and I don't think we realize that that's what it is, and we don't understand how these books came together. So the Bible is made up of 66 different books. And it's broken up into two different sections. It's the Old Testament and the New Testament. And the basic difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament is how you got saved. In the Old Testament, you were saved by what was the law or the Ten Commandments. You were made right with God if you did certain things, if you didn't ever break any of the Ten Commandments. But then in the New Testament, you have Jesus, and Jesus is here to show us that because of our relationship with Him, that's what allows us to be saved. See, the Old Testament, some people kind of wonder, well, did God just have a bad day and then just change His mind and decide to do things differently? No, God gave us the Old Testament to show us that, look, you can't do this on your own. You can't become saved by your works. That's the point of the New Testament, of the Old Testament, is to say that you can't do this by being a good enough person. And so it's showing us the importance of why Jesus is huge in our life. And so that's just kind of a real basic breakdown of the Bible. But I found this thing called the Bible Project, and we're going to go through them. And what they're doing is breaking down different books of the Bible and explaining why that they're important. And sometimes, especially when you're reading the Old Testament, it can get man, I don't understand why this is important or why these stories are what they mean, because every story in the Bible has an importance, especially in the Old Testament. It's pointing to Jesus in some way, typically. And so what we're going to do is we're going to watch these videos, and they don't have all of them done because they're still actually creating a lot of the Old Testament. They only have about 6 of the Old Testament ones done, and a lot of the New Testament ones. They probably got about 7 or 8, I think, of the New Testament books. But we're going to go through the ones that they have, and that's going to be part of our focus of our weekly teachings. And then we're also going to do some other stuff. But I wanted to start off this week and next week by learning about the first one. They've got 2 different, the first book, which is Genesis, because they really pull out some really cool things. And these videos are just overview videos. They're about anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes long. And so what I want you guys to do is be taking notes and then submitting those notes to us on the website. And those will get the notes for the videos will get emailed directly to me. Make sure that you're in your journal. Again, if you're a JV student leader, you need to be journaling at least. We need to see at least 1 entry. If you're a varsity leader, we need to see at least 3. And if you're a senior leader, we need to see at least 5. And so those should start coming in this week. And again, don't do all 5 of them, if you're a senior leader this week, or all 3 of them, all 5 of them in one day just to get them done. We want this to become a daily thing. And so check out this video. This is the first part of Genesis, and they're going to kind of break down the first book of the Bible, which is Genesis. Next week, we're going to do the second video. And I would also ask, don't jump ahead in these videos. They have all these videos posted, but don't jump ahead too quick because I want us to all go through them together. So make sure to check this out, and I'm really excited, guys.
The first book in the Bible is a book you've probably heard of. It's called Genesis.
Genesis comes from a Hebrew word. It's pronounced reshit, and it just means beginning.
Now, there's a lot of stories from the book of Genesis, and it's easy just to pull out a specific story and try to tell you what it might mean. But we think the best way to understand this book is to look at the book as a whole and show you how the whole thing is designed.
The book is designed to fall into 2 main parts. You have chapters 1 through 11, which is telling the story of God and the whole world. And then you have the second part, which is about God and Abraham's family, as chapters 12 through 50. And how the 2 of those parts relate, that's where you find the message of the book.
Okay, so let's start back at the beginning. The first part of Genesis begins with a creation story where God creates everything.
And how exactly that happens, of course, that's where all the debates come. But he takes a dark, watery chaos and he turns it into a beautiful garden where humans can flourish.
That sounds nice.
It does sound nice. In fact, 7 different times God says of all that he's made that it's good.
And this is where we meet the first human characters in the Bible, Adam and Eve.
They're both individual characters, but they're also representative. Adam is the Hebrew word for humanity, and Eve is the Hebrew word for life.
And God creates them in his image.
In other words, humanity reflects, or is meant to reflect, the creativity, the goodness, and character of the Creator out into the world that he's made. And they're supposed to reproduce and make cultures and neighborhoods and art and gardens and everything else. But he gives them a moral
Choice about how they're going to go about building this world. And this is what the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is all about.
And he tells them, don't eat of the fruit of this tree or you will die. What's that all about?
So up till now, God has been the one defining and providing what is good. And so God is the one with the knowledge of good and evil. But now this tree represents a choice. Will the humans trust God's definition of good and evil, or are they going to seize the opportunity and define good and evil for themselves?
And Adam and Eve eat the fruit.
This is the core biblical explanation for that concept of sin, that desire to call the shots myself. It's the inward turn of the human heart to do what's good for me and my tribe, even if it's at the expense of you and your tribe.
And the problem is humans are horrible at defining good and evil without God. And so now that humanity's made this choice, things get really
bad. So Genesis 3 through 11 is like tracing this downward spiral of all humanity. So Adam and Eve, they can't trust each other anymore. And so there's a little story about how they were naked and felt fine about it beforehand, but now they feel shameful because all of a sudden Adam's definition of good and evil might be different than Eve's, and so they hide from each other.
Then there's another story of temptation. Cain is jealous of his brother Abel, and he gives in and kills him.
There's a story right after Cain about a guy named Lamech, and all we know about Lamech is that he accumulates wives like property, and he sings songs about how he's a more violent, vengeful person than Cain ever was, and he's proud of it.
Things get so bad with the human race that we see God decide to just wipe us out.
Yeah, we typically think of the flood story as about God being angry, but it actually begins with God's sadness and grief about the state of his world. And so out of his passion to preserve the goodness of his world, he washes it clean with the flood.
But there's a glimmer of hope. He chooses Noah and his whole family, and he saves them on this boat.
Yeah, don't forget about the animals.
Right, and the animals. So Noah and his family are going to reboot all of humanity. I mean, he must be a pretty great guy.
But this is the story most people don't know because it's kind of weird, is that Noah gets off the boat and he plants a vineyard and he gets totally plastered. And then something sketchy happens in his tent with his son. It's a tragic story.
So from here, humanity grows again, but things are as bad as before. And the last story is the famous story of the Tower of Babel.
And in this story, you have all of the nations uniting together to use this new technology they have, the brick. And they want to make a name for themselves and build this big city with a huge tower that will reach up to the gods. But God knows that this city will be a nightmare. And so in his mercy, he scatters them. And all of these stories, they're underlining the same basic idea. When humans seize autonomy from God, when they define good and evil for themselves, it results in a world of tragedy and death.
And this leaves you wondering, is there any hope for humanity?
Yes, yeah, there is. It's the very next story that answers that question. It's the beginning of God's mission to rescue and restore his world.